Names and some details have been changed to protect privacy. This story is based on real events. October 26, 2020. A quiet residential district in Northern Europe. A standard 9-story apartment building on Hawthorne Street is equipped with security cameras. The entrance is clean, silent. A young man steps out of the elevator on the 7th floor and approaches one of the apartments. The tenant, 33-year-old Emily Carter, hasn't shown up at work for 5 days. He has a key. He unlocks the door and walks inside. The apartment is in perfect order. Nothing is broken. Furniture untouched. No signs of a struggle. He moves toward the bedroom. Emily is lying on the bed. Her body is completely unclothed, positioned with disturbing precision, arms and legs aligned straight along her sides. It looks as if someone arranged her after death. When forensic specialists arrive, they immediately notice a critical detail. Emily is missing the index finger on her right hand. The cut is clean, made with a sharp object. There is no blood in the room. And the severed finger is gone. Whoever did this didn't just kill her. They took part of her with them. At that moment, investigators don't yet realize that the missing finger will later be identified as a tool, not a trophy. To understand why a respected university lecturer was murdered in an ordinary neighborhood, detectives begin reconstructing Emily Carter's life. Emily grew up in a small industrial town. After moving to the capital, she devoted herself to academia and research. By 33, she was teaching at a technical university. To neighbors, Emily seemed invisible, quiet, reserved. No loud guests, no parties. Her parents lived far away and rarely visited. She did have a boyfriend. He had keys to the apartment, but neighbors barely saw him. No one thought of them as a real couple. He would later become the one who discovered the body. And the first to notice something else was missing. Emily's work laptops. Behind the calm routine of a public university employee, hid something unusual. Money. Media initially speculated that Emily earned her wealth through modeling. Her social media contained professional photos. But her family denied it completely. Those photos never brought her income. Her real source of money was financial markets. A friend later described her as a mathematical prodigy. Emily didn't just invest casually. She built complex strategies, studied market behavior, and traded aggressively. Within a few years, she purchased multiple apartments across the city. She held substantial funds in bank accounts. She supported her parents. She lent money to friends, often without contracts. Trusting. Too trusting. That trait would prove fatal. One of those people was Alex Monroe. Emily transferred him $35,000. No paperwork. Just a bank transfer. The money was supposed to fund an IT startup. In return, Alex promised not only repayment, but profits exceeding $150,000. The apartment on Hawthorne Street soon became a sealed crime scene. For weeks, investigators dismantled the space piece by piece. Neighbors watched as officers worked day and night, removing not just personal belongings, but sections of the apartment itself. Walls, floor panels, bathroom fixtures. Experts were hunting for microscopic biological traces. And then they uncovered another disturbing fact. Emily's body hadn't just been exposed. It had been carefully washed. No fibers, no dust, no foreign particles, nothing. This discovery pushed investigators toward a terrifying theory. What if the murder wasn't only about money? What if it was personal? Or worse, obsessive? A possibility emerged. Someone had interacted with the body after death, and tried to erase every trace with water. That's why forensic teams searched every surface, every wall, every centimeter of floor. To find DNA, they were willing to destroy the apartment entirely. But the most chilling part of this case was still ahead. Because while Emily was already dead, someone continued using her social media accounts. For 5 days. They cut entire sections of wallpaper from the walls, from the exact spots where the killer might have touched them. Upholstery was stripped from sofas and chairs. From the bathroom, investigators removed tiles, pipes, and plumbing fixtures. Forensic specialists were searching for traces of liquid in seams and microscopic cracks, places where water could have seeped while the body was being washed. Every fragment of the apartment was sealed and sent for laboratory analysis. A series of advanced genetic tests followed. Experts were hunting for the smallest particles of foreign skin cells, anything that didn't belong to the victim. At the same time, investigators began preparing materials for a psychiatric evaluation. The killer's behavior appeared ritualistic, precise, deliberate, and emotionally detached, something that required professional psychological profiling. While biological samples were processed in laboratories, the apartment remained empty and devastated. Primary forensic results revealed something deeply unsettling. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. This meant only one thing. Emily Carter knew the person who entered her home, and she didn't expect danger. The apartment, torn apart and missing pieces of its walls and furniture, bore silent witness to someone who acted with absolute control. Investigators now faced a crucial question. Who in Emily's inner circle had access to her digital devices? Devices that vanished from the scene along with her missing finger. Between October 21 and October 26, 2020, while the apartment on Hawthorne Street remained locked and silent, Emily's digital identity stayed alive. Her colleagues at the Technical University and close friends had no idea she was dead, but they noticed something disturbing. Emily, who always preferred voice calls, suddenly switched to text-only communication. Her messaging accounts appeared constantly online. Every call was instantly declined. Someone was deliberately creating the illusion that she was still alive. And that illusion was made possible by the severed index finger. Using it, the unknown perpetrator bypassed the smartphone's biometric security, gaining full access to Emily's private messages, personal files, and banking applications. At that point, investigators still didn't know who was behind the screen. But one thing was already clear. The murder didn't end with her death. Continued. Digitally. The first suspicious activity on Emily's phone appeared as a financial transaction. Money was transferred from her account to one of her longtime acquaintances, $2,500. Over the same 5-day period, Emily's bank card was used to pay for fuel and auto repair services. But stealing money was not the perpetrator's primary goal. What mattered far more was misdirection. A cold, calculated game began inside messaging apps. A game designed to delay one critical moment. The discovery of the body. Emily's colleagues began receiving messages claiming that she had been urgently hospitalized. The person writing from her account insisted she was in serious condition and unable to speak. The deception was meticulous. Whenever colleagues or friends tried to call her, the call was immediately declined, followed by a prepared response. Doctors have forbidden her from talking. Her phone is often kept at the nurse's station. Every detail sounded plausible. Too plausible. On October 24, worried by the prolonged silence, Emily's friends created a private group chat to coordinate efforts to reach her. The killer joined it. Using full access to Emily's account, the impersonator wrote directly in the group, calmly confirming the story of hospitalization, reassuring everyone, buying time. This imitation of life lasted exactly 5 days. Friends and colleagues believed Emily was under medical supervision. They waited. The digital mask worked perfectly. It allowed the murderer to remain invisible, right up until the morning of October 26. Only when the silence became impossible to explain. Only when the hospital story stopped making sense. The apartment door on Hawthorne Street was opened with a spare key. And only then did investigators realize the truth. For 5 days, everyone had been communicating not with Emily, but with her killer, a person whose technical trail had yet to be uncovered. After the body was discovered on October 26, 2020, and the disappearance of her devices was officially recorded, the investigation entered a new phase. A phase focused not on witnesses, not on motives, but on digital forensics. Because the answer to who killed Emily Carter was hidden inside the phone that kept pretending she was still alive. The specialist's primary objective was clear: identify the person who had impersonated Emily Carter for 5 days. While forensic teams continued searching the apartment for biological traces, technical experts shifted their focus to digital logs and system records. The first real breakthrough came from a bank security report. Transaction analysis revealed the identity of the recipient of the very first money transfer made from Emily's account immediately after her disappearance. That last name became the investigation's new starting point. Within hours, detectives narrowed the suspect list to one individual, a man from Emily's inner circle. Investigators then turned to surveillance footage from the building on Hawthorne Street. Video archives from October 21 confirmed his presence. He entered the building in the afternoon and didn't leave until late that evening. On camera, the suspect appeared calm and confident. He made no effort to hide his face, a detail investigators interpreted as a sign of absolute confidence in his own impunity. At the same time, cybersecurity specialists completed a geolocation analysis. Every login to Emily's social media accounts during those 5 days originated from IP addresses tied to a specific residential address, located outside the city. Technical examination confirmed something even more damning. Emily's stolen laptop and smartphone were physically located at that same address, the suspect's home. By the morning of October 27th, law enforcement had a complete digital reconstruction of everything that happened during the 5-day silence. Money transfers, surveillance footage, P-logs, device geolocation. Together, these elements allowed investigators to abandon the theory of an unknown serial offender. The case was no longer about a random predator. It was about a calculated crime committed by someone she trusted. The suspect's name was Alex Monroe, an IT specialist, a man who deliberately planted false narratives in private messages, but failed to account for one thing. Modern banking and network systems never forget the final destination of a transaction, or the physical location of a login. Armed with this evidence, the task force moved to execute a search and arrest operation. When Alex Monroe was detained, he was 37 years old, and the digital mask he had worn for 5 days finally collapsed. He presented himself as a highly skilled freelance IT specialist. A self-taught programmer, Alex Monroe had deeply studied coding and information security. His expertise allowed him to take on complex contracts involving digital surveillance and protection systems. As investigators reconstructed his background, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Signs of a personality prone to radical decisions. As a teenager, Alex disappeared from home for nearly 2 years, completely cutting off contact with his parents. He met Emily Carter during their university years. What followed was a long and complicated relationship, one that ended and restarted multiple times over the years. Even after their final breakup, they maintained friendly contact, bound by shared interests and, eventually, financial ties. Behind the image of a stable family man, living with his wife and mother-in-law, was a very different reality. Alex was facing financial collapse. He tried to scale his IT projects but failed. One loss followed another, pulling him into a spiraling debt crisis. He took out high-interest loans, borrowed from acquaintances, did everything he could to preserve the appearance of a successful specialist. His largest creditor was Emily. By October 2020, the total amount he owed her exceeded $40,000. She transferred the money without contracts or promissory notes, relying solely on years of trust. The startup the funds were meant to support turned out to be a fiction. The situation reached a breaking point when Emily began demanding repayment. Persistently, relentlessly. Alex understood something terrifying. There was no legal way for him to repay the debt. What he still had were his technical skills and physical access to her apartment. Friends later described Alex during this period as withdrawn and emotionally sealed off. His wife would tell investigators that in the final month before the tragedy, he barely slept. Night after night, he sat in front of his laptop, planning, calculating, and slowly moving toward a point of no return. For Alex Monroe, killing Emily Carter was not only a way to erase his debts. It was a method to seize control of her assets, using his technical expertise to secretly manage her accounts after her death. On October 27, 2020, a task force entered Monroe's apartment. He offered no physical resistance. Controlled, almost detached. According to search records, Alex began cooperating almost immediately, pointing investigators to where evidence was hidden. Then came the discovery that stunned even seasoned officers. In a wardrobe near his bed, investigators found an ordinary-looking bundle. Inside was a paper napkin. Wrapped inside it was Emily's severed index finger. 4-5 days after the murder, Alex had kept this biological fragment inside the apartment, close to himself and his wife. It was not a souvenir. It was a tool. The finger was used to maintain uninterrupted access to Emily's smartphone and its biometric lock. During the search, officers seized every device taken from Emily's apartment. 2 laptops, tablet, smartphone, an external hard drive. Monroe's wife claimed the equipment was there for urgent software setup for a client. Investigators also found Emily's bank cards and a set of keys to her apartment. Separately, they recovered items Monroe himself admitted using to manipulate the body. Rubber gloves, a wooden cutting board, kitchen knife. The investigation established that on October 23, 2 days after the murder, Monroe secretly returned to Emily's apartment. The purpose of the visit was precise. He needed to retrieve her tablet, the final piece required to access cloud storage and gain full control over her digital ecosystem. After his arrest, Alex voluntarily provided passwords to all devices. He demonstrated step by step how he moved money through banking apps. From that moment on, he began describing the crime in technical detail, focusing on processes, systems, and execution. But when it came to why it happened, his story changed. Prosecutors viewed the crime as a cold, calculated plan to eliminate debt and take over financial assets. Monroe, however, began insisting on something else. He claimed the killing was an accident. That claim would become the central point of contention in court. Because while the digital trail told one story, the crime itself told another. He tried to frame what happened on Hawthorne Street as a sudden emotional breakdown, a spontaneous outburst, unrelated to money or personal gain. This version became the foundation of his defense. His attorneys pushed to have the charge reclassified from premeditated murder to actions committed in a state of emotional distress, a move prosecutors firmly rejected. During interrogations, Alex Monroe presented a narrative that sharply contradicted the material evidence. He admitted to killing Emily Carter, but denied any financial motive. According to him, on the evening of their meeting, he was suddenly overwhelmed by a memory from 2008, a moment when Emily allegedly cheated on him in his presence. The fact that they had been separated for years, and that Monroe was legally married, was conveniently ignored. He insisted the attack was the result of a sudden surge of jealousy over events that had happened more than a decade earlier. His lawyer emphasized Monroe's supposed psychological instability, pointing to his frequent crying during investigative procedures as proof of remorse, and as evidence that there had been no prior plan. The defense also highlighted another detail. Monroe did not hide his face from security cameras. He freely entered a well-lit building. According to the defense, this behavior proved spontaneity. Investigators saw it very differently. They interpreted these actions as overconfidence, the mindset of an IT specialist who believed he could hide behind a digital alibi. Experts pointed to crucial facts. He carried rubber gloves. He calmly used a cutting board from the victim's kitchen immediately after her death. And instead of calling for help or showing shock, he moved directly to financial transactions and the seizure of digital devices. The timeline told a clear story. There was no panic, no hesitation, no attempt to save her. Only a methodical sequence of actions aimed at money and control. Taken together, these steps confirmed that Monroe acted according to a preconceived plan, one designed to eliminate a creditor. A comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, conducted over several months, declared him fully sane. Specialists acknowledged certain personality traits, but confirmed that at the moment of the crime, Monroe fully understood his actions and their consequences. The court ultimately dismissed the jealousy narrative as an attempt to reduce punishment. For prosecutors, the financial motive remained central. The immediate transfer of funds and theft of devices after Emily's death became irrefutable proof of greed-driven intent. And in that evidence, the case found its final clarity. Monroe continued to portray himself as a victim of circumstances. But the facts told a very different story. They pointed to the cold calculation of a man who chose the most extreme way to erase his debts. The condition of Emily Carter's body at the time it was discovered became a focal point of forensic analysis. Investigators established that Monroe remained inside her apartment for a significant amount of time after the killing. According to his own testimony, he moved Emily's body to the bathroom, removed her clothing, and washed her with water. After that, he dried the body, carried it back to the bedroom, and placed it on the bed, carefully arranging the limbs in a strictly symmetrical position. At first, these actions raised suspicions of a possible intimate motive. However, months of genetic examinations completely refuted that theory. Laboratory tests found no biological evidence indicating sexual activity either before or after death, on the body or anywhere in the apartment. The condition of the skin told investigators something else. Prosecutors concluded that the washing was not a ritual. It was a cleanup procedure. Experts determined that Monroe, possessing basic forensic knowledge, deliberately attempted to remove microscopic traces, fibers from his clothing, skin particles, or sweat residues, especially from areas where physical contact may have occurred during the struggle. He approached evidence destruction with technical precision, attempting to neutralize the crime scene. The defense argued that Monroe's actions in the bathroom were the result of shock, that he was not fully aware of what he was doing. Prosecutors disagreed. They emphasized the thoroughness with which he cleaned the body and arranged it afterward. This level of order, they argued, indicated not confusion, but focused intent to mislead the investigation. Psychiatric experts supported that conclusion, noting that such behavior is typical of individuals with a high degree of self-control. The court ultimately ruled that what happened in the bathroom was part of a deliberate plan to eliminate physical evidence. In effect, Monroe's attempt to literally wash away the crime became yet another confirmation of his mental competence, and of the intentional nature of every action he took. To reconstruct the precise sequence of events on the evening of October 21st, investigators turned to minute-by-minute analysis of telecommunications and call routing data. And that digital timeline would soon close the final gaps in the case. At approximately 6 p.m., Alex Monroe arrived at the apartment building on Hawthorne Street by taxi. Emily Carter let him in herself. The meeting began calmly. She made tea. For several hours, they talked about work and the repayment of his debt. During the conversation, Monroe pretended to be waiting for a courier who was supposedly bringing a large amount of cash to cover part of what he owed. He would later admit there was no courier. The story served one purpose: to justify his prolonged presence in the apartment and to wait for the right moment. The atmosphere remained peaceful until Monroe suggested giving Emily a massage. She was seated, unaware of any danger. He began rubbing her shoulders. Later, when Emily moved toward the hallway, Monroe followed her and suddenly used physical force. According to case materials, she offered little resistance, managing only to say, "Alex, what are you doing?" Before losing consciousness. Monroe maintained pressure until her breathing stopped. Immediately afterward, he moved to the technical phase of his plan. He knew that to control her accounts, he needed a biological key, the same one Emily used to unlock her smartphone. Putting on rubber gloves, he went to the kitchen, took a wooden cutting board and a knife. Returning to the body, he removed the index finger from her right hand. What followed was the washing of the body in the bathroom, an act investigators later classified as an attempt to destroy microscopic DNA traces. After completing these actions, Monroe gathered the stolen property. The severed finger was wrapped in a paper napkin and placed in his pocket. At around 10 p.m., he locked the apartment door and left. Catching a ride, he traveled to a nearby town. The next morning, he used that biological key to access Emily's devices and began the 5-day digital impersonation that convinced friends and colleagues she was still alive. The trial of Alex Monroe took place in the regional court of a major European city. The central legal dispute focused on how to classify his actions. Prosecutors argued that the killing was committed in connection with robbery. Monroe admitted responsibility for Emily Carter's death, but continued to deny a financial motive. In its final ruling, the court replaced the robbery charge with theft, determining that the property was taken after the victim's death. However, the financial motive itself was proven. The judge stated that Monroe's goal was clear: to eliminate a debt exceeding $40,000 and take control of Emily's assets. In April 2022, the court delivered its verdict. Alex Monroe was sentenced to 16 years in a maximum security prison. The court also ordered him to pay $50,000 in compensation to Emily's parents. In June 2022, the appellate court upheld the sentence without changes. The verdict entered into force. The ruling legally confirmed Monroe's status as a man who committed murder, and then used a fragment of the victim's body to facilitate theft and digital fraud. Emily's parents attended every hearing. For them, the sentence represented only partial justice. Even in court, Monroe continued to insist on the story of sudden jealousy. But the 5-day digital impersonation of Emily became decisive proof that behind his words was not emotion, but cold calculation. He erased his debts at the cost of the life of the person who trusted him. Today, the apartment on Hawthorne Street remains empty. At night, its windows stay dark. According to neighbors, no one has moved in since the forensic work ended. Emily's parents have completely withdrawn from public contact. The compensation was paid, but it brought no comfort. Alex Monroe continues to serve his sentence in a maximum security facility. His wife has not cut off contact with him, despite the established fact that their household expenses were paid with stolen money. In the town where he was arrested, the story is slowly fading from memory. But the case remains a stark reminder. In a world of high technology, trust can become a weapon. And the most dangerous crimes are sometimes committed not by strangers, but by those who know exactly how your life works, both offline and online.